How to Create the Universe, The God Series Book 32, by Mike Hockney. This free audiobook series has been brought to you by the Foundation of Illuministic Guides. Contact the Foundation publicly listen, the Phoenix, at tinyurl.com/foundation322. Check our Foundation page at tinyurl.com/foundation323. And we have a posting group with many books and resources at tinyurl.com/foundation324. For the complete books that will be covered in this series, see tinyurl.com/Hockney322. Remember, there are many truths within lies and lies within fact. Truth is relative to the observer. The sign of a seeker is the quest for the truth. In that sign you shall conquer. Find the path in your own quest for the Gnostic Grail of illumination. Choose wisely. We will be watching you. In a Hockney, Chapter 3, The Circles of Eternity. The principle of sufficient reason mandates that all equivalent states must be given exact parity of treatment, strange though it may seem. This is what provides the foundation of existence. This requirement entails that the circle is the fundamental basis of reality. In a circle, every point on the circumference has the same status as every other point on the circumference. Moreover, if this is true for one circle, it's true for any circle. However, we are now faced with a different question. What exactly do we mean by circle? How are we going to define a circle? We must of course apply mathematics. But what manner of mathematics? Are we referring to circles defined by positive real numbers, or a mixture of positive and negative real numbers? What about imaginary numbers and complex numbers? How are we going to decide what are the circles of eternity? The question now becomes one of mathematical stability, completeness and consistency. Taking stability first, a cosmos must have perfect foundations. It cannot have a single flaw. Any operation or transformation applied to it must not result in any contradictions or anomalies, since these would prove catastrophic. Imagine we were presented with a positive real number of 25. How would we be able to distinguish -52 from 52? There is no sufficient reason to discard one or the other, so we must accept both. The number 1 can be generated from -1, 2 or 12. Now imagine taking square roots of all numbers. There is no sufficient reason why only positive numbers should have square roots. However, in order to take square roots of negative numbers, we require so-called imaginary numbers. Once we have imaginary numbers and real numbers, then we have complex numbers. The fundamental theorem of algebra states that the field of complex numbers is algebraically closed. This is not true of the field real numbers. Step by step, as you probe with the principle of sufficient reason the stability, consistency and completeness of possible mathematical realities, all versions of mathematics bar one is found to be riddled with fatal problems. The only version of mathematics that's eternally stable in itself and under all operations and transformations is the one deriving from a single cosmic master formula, the God equation. A single formula cannot be inconsistent or incomplete with regard to itself. The God equation derives from Euler's formula. Euler's formula concerns a unit circle in the complex plane, as shown below. So, the fundamental circle of existence is that defined with respect to the complex plane. Only this kind of circle is compatible with an eternally stable, consistent and complete version of mathematics, that is with what we call ontological mathematics, as opposed to the abstract mathematics that's taught at school. Some people don't get the relationship between circles on the one hand and sines and cosines on the other. Here's an excellent animation to illustrate the connection. https://commons.wikimediaorg/wiki/file_cos_sin.gif. What's the significance of this? Well, what you are looking at is none other than the basic process of existence. Thanks to the principle of sufficient reason, all equivalent ontological states, that is every state that exactly equals 0, must be sampled equally, continuously, with no leaps or gaps, and forever. Famously, if x equals cos x plus I sin x, Euler's formula, then, when x equals I plus 1 equals 0, Euler's identity. But we can substitute any value for x and get an expression that equals 0. So all x states are exactly equal. Behind the scenes, all that nature ever does is trace out perfect Euler circles of every possible frequency. It does this because of the principle of sufficient reason, and nothing else. There is no God involved in this process. There is no mystical oneness, or cosmic consciousness, or universal will, or random miracles jumping out of non-existence. There is no unknowable Kantian noumenal universe. The universe we are describing is the most knowable there can possibly be. The universal pure reason, reality, ultimate reality, comprises nothing but Euler circles, in every possible orientation, going round and round forever. As an Euler circle gets traced out, that is as a point flows around the circumference of the circle thanks to the motive force of the principle of sufficient reason, which demands that every value of x be equally sampled, in strict succession, it generates a cosine wave and marching sine wave, which are of course orthogonal to each other. Have you realized what we are saying? Eternal reality comprises just mathematical circles, and the sine and cosine waves, of all possible frequencies, which they generate. That's it. That's the permanent background to existence, which can never change under any circumstances. It's eternal, necessary, complete, consistent, immutable, stable under all mathematical operations and transformations applied to it, and comprises the entire basis of infallible, absolute truth and knowledge. This is the bottom line, the ground of all, the arshir, the ultimate substance. This is Plato's perfect, immaterial, transcendent domain of forms, outside space and time. All of the forms are pure math, and nothing else. Reason alone can take you to this domain. Your senses, science, and your feelings, mainstream religion, won't help you one jot. It's an intelligible domain, not sensible, and not emotional. A key formula related to Euler's formula is de Moivre's formula, xn equals x equals inx equals, cos x plus I sin xn equals cos, nx, plus I sin, nx. N can be interpreted as an internal change to Euler's formula, representing frequency. As n goes up, an Euler circle has a higher and higher frequency, that is more and more energy. It's essential to grasp a few key points about what we are saying. Firstly, the principle that stands behind everything, the principle that renders existence rational, logical and intelligible, which gives existence a definitive answer, is the principle of sufficient reason. This principle, by demanding that every equal state be given parity of treatment, is the origin of motion. That is, motion exists purely because of the principle of sufficient reason, and could not exist without it. The principle of sufficient reason is therefore the Aristotelian God, the unmoved mover, the uncaused cause, the prime mover. The principle of sufficient reason, being a principle, does not move, but it is ontologically expressed through mathematics, through Euler's formula. Motion, governed exclusively by the principle of sufficient reason, is the source of all the energy. That is, there would be no such thing as energy without mathematical motion, which is in turn generated by the principle of sufficient reason. To put it another way, motion and energy are purely mathematical in origin, and have no other meaning. There is no such thing as scientific motion or energy. Another key point is that we have now definitively defined what mathematics is, and what it certainly isn't. Mathematics has nothing at all to do with logicism, axioms, formalism, set theory, intuitionism, or anything else. It's purely defined by the principle of sufficient reason. The principle of sufficient reason equally defines ontology and epistemology. If it were not for the principle of sufficient reason, the universe could be neither rational nor intelligible, and there could be no knowledge and no truth. There could be no answer to existence. It would be a miracle. In fact, without the principle of sufficient reason, there could be no existence at all. Kurt Gödel said, but every error is due to extraneous factors, such as emotion and education. Reason itself does not err. This is the whole point. The principle of sufficient reason ensures that the foundations of existence are perfect. They do not contain a single error, and they are incapable of a single error. The ground of existence is a set of perfect, eternal, mathematical circles, which corresponds to a set of perfect, eternal, mathematical sines and cosines. These are none other than the basis frequencies of ontological Fourier mathematics. Absolutely everything takes place against this background. There is no such thing as non-existence from which existence can miraculously jump, as science absurdly and irrationally claims. We have provided the answer to the ground of existence. There can be no other answer, at least none that could ever qualify as rational and intelligible. From this background, we must be able to explain everything. This mathematical background must be able to account for life, mind, time, space and matter. They must be properties of this mathematical background. How can we possibly get mind and life from math? The answer lies in realizing that sinusoids are none other than thoughts in themselves. A thought needs to have content and be carried. The sinusoidal wave is the carrier. But what is the content? Because a wave is energy, the content is an expression of energy too. Every value of energy has its own unique signature. Consider the electromagnetic spectrum. Every part of it has different properties. We have extremely high frequencies, gamma rays, X-rays, visible light, infrared, microwaves, radio waves, and extremely low frequencies. Consider the visible portion of the spectrum. Every frequency has its own color. The point is that every energy, frequency, corresponds to a unique experience. Energy is not something purely rational. It's not something abstract. It's not pure form. It has content too. It has an empirical as well as a rational aspect. It can be experienced. It's not just math. It's rationalist math combined with empiricist math. This is how we get the dual aspect ontology corresponding to the different but related worlds of rationalism and empiricism. They are the opposite sides of the coin. You can never get the one without the other. Since we have a set of rational things, which are also empirical things, when viewed from the opposite side of the coin, we have everything that a mind requires. We don't need to refer to anything called matter. We are dealing purely with mental, mathematical things, form and content, information carrier and information carried, signifier and signified, map and territory. Moreover, all mental events are living events. That is, to have thoughts is to automatically have life. A universe of mathematical thoughts in themselves is none other than a universe of life in itself. The universe is fundamentally alive, just as all of humanity once believed. Before the rise of scientific materialism and atheism, we have given the only conceivable definition of mind and life in themselves. All life and mind flows from mathematics, and thus from the principle of sufficient reason. We are thereby in the territory of Pythagoras's world where all things are numbers, and numbers rules all. We are in Leibniz's world of monads. We are in Hegel's world of panlogism, of a dialectically evolving mind, spirit. We definitely are not in any scientific world of matter, but nor are we in any ludicrous world of religious mythos, superstition, faith and mysticism. We are instead in the hyper-rationalist world of pure mathematics and pure reason. It has to be understood that the world we have described is timeless. It has never not existed. It wasn't a case of the principle of sufficient reason coming first, and then creating a world of mathematics. Rather, the principle of sufficient reason is inextricably linked to mathematics, and eternally expressed through it. A circle has no beginning and no end, and nor does the mathematics that expresses circles. Geometrically, the circle is what allows all equivalent states to be treated with complete parity, as required by the principle of sufficient reason. If we rotate a circle in the right way, around its north-south axis, we of course get a sphere, and if we have circles of different amplitude or centered on the same origin, then we have a set of nested spheres, bringing to mind the perfect, ethereal crystal spheres of the Aristotelian worldview that, in the ancient world, defined the perfect heavens above us, where the gods resided. As ever, the amazing ancient Greeks arrived at the right concept, but got their details slightly wrong because their mathematical knowledge wasn't advanced enough. The crystal spheres are not in space and time, and aren't made of ether. They are immaterial, made of pure energy, and they exist timelessly, outside of space, in the frequency domain. The ancient Greeks were enormously superior thinkers to modern scientists. Even though they did not have the stunningly powerful mathematics at their disposal that science now has, the ancient Greeks were entirely committed to using reason, logic, metaphysical and mathematical arguments to explain reality, unlike modern scientists who subscribe to no rational and logical principles at all, but are instead absolutely committed to materialism and empiricism, and sensory experiments as the arbiter of what is real and what is not. The ancient Greeks saw the universe as a living, mental organism, imbued with meaning and purpose. Modern science entirely rejects this. It denies teleology, it denies life and mind as inherent properties of existence, and its bizarre and irrational worldview is that existence randomly jumps out of nothing, for no reason, via no mechanism, for no purpose, with no meaning. We are simply contingent, ephemeral, temporal and miraculous collections of lifeless, mindless, purposeless, meaningless atoms that randomly came together to produce the meaningless epiphenomena of life and mind, which are inexplicable emergent properties of how matter is organized. This scientific explanation is the worst ever because it's the one furthest removed from the principle of sufficient reason. Ontological mathematics is predicated entirely on this principle. Science, on the other hand, rejects it, hence subscribes to a principle of unreason, which, by definition, makes it an irrational ideology. Any rationalism that appears in science has nothing to do with science, but is imported from the mathematics that science invalidly uses, even though science has never once attempted to define what mathematics actually is. Any system that privileges the senses over reason, logic and intellect, as science does, is doomed. It will never lead us to the rational, intelligible answer to existence. Geometrically, we need a system based on the circle. Algebraically, we need a formula that is entirely concerned with circles. Euler's formula furnishes exactly this. In geometry, two or more objects are said to be concentric when they share the same center. What is the dead center of existence, around which all the Euler circles revolve? It's none other than absolute nothing, the singularity of the infinity of static mathematical points. The celestial spheres, or celestial orbs, were the fundamental entities of the cosmological models developed by Plato, Eudoxus, Aristotle, Ptolemy, Copernicus and others. In these celestial models the apparent motions of the fixed stars and the planets are accounted for by treating them as embedded in rotating spheres made of an ethereal, transparent fifth element, quintessence, like jewels set in orbs. Since it was believed that the fixed stars did not change their positions relative to one another, it was argued that they must be on the surface of a single starry sphere. After Anaximenes, Pythagoras, Xenophanes and Parmenides all held that the universe was spherical, and much later in the 4th century BC Plato's Timaeus proposed that the body of the cosmos was made in their most perfect and uniform shape, that of a sphere containing the fixed stars. Wikipedia. Another way to think about ontological mathematics is as the sole survivor of the ultimate battle outside time, the battle of all possible different versions of mathematics. The central assertion of ontological mathematics is that only it is consistent and complete, stable under all operations and transformations, and always equal to zero, the compulsory ground state energy of the universe. Any proposed version of mathematics that does not satisfy these requirements will contain fatal internal contradictions that will immediately wipe it out. Only ontological mathematics exists eternally and necessarily. It enshrines and conveys all of the eternal truths of reason. This is inevitable given that it is the ontological expression of the principle of sufficient reason. Only the principle of sufficient reason can provide a rational, logical, intelligible answer to existence. Nothing based on anything opposed to this principle, that is a principle of no sufficient reason, can ever rationally explain anything at all given that it is, by definition, a repudiation of rational explanations by sufficient reasons. This is the whole problem with both science and mainstream religion. Neither accepts the principle of sufficient reason,